more balls than most. Those are the big, bold, embossed words on the black box Tom Hicks received from his grandmother. Yeah, his grandma. This was several years ago when he was having some challenges in his life. Inside the box was a 3-ball juggling kit, which included a pamphlet titled A Short Course in Life Enhancement. Okay, you had me at balls. Now I'm really curious. How in the world does juggling enhance one's life? Quite substantially, it turns out, because this kit helped Tom completely reframe failure in his life. Instead of feeling like the end of something, juggling helped him see how failure is usually just the beginning. You can drop those balls 1,000,000 times, and it's okay.
Hi-ho.
Low-stakes failures like this are exactly how we train our brain to get used to it, welcome it even. Next thing you know, Tom is, delivering workshops around the country, helping folks create a better relationship with messing up. You're saying, how fascinating, with arms raised high when you blow a big deal. Inviting curiosity about where you might do things differently next time. Most of our work cultures don't work like this. Most talk a big game about how failing is how we learn, but their actions scream, you suck and you better get your act together fast. Those folks need more balls. Perhaps Tom has a few he can spare. Welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast, the show where we cut through the BS and find ways to make work more fun, more human, and less ridiculous. All of which makes your business more profitable, by the way. If you enjoy this one, please like, share, rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast. Let the desuckifying begin. Here's Tom. Okay, Tom Hicks, welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast.
Thanks for having me, TJ.
Thanks for coming on. I'd love to hear a little bit about your story, your background, let people know, how are you out there desuckifying the world of work for folks?
Great question, and I appreciate you putting this phrase and this philosophy out there, TJ. I love your podcast. It's in my regular rotation now.
Thank you.
I come away with new ideas and reflections every episode, so I'm thrilled and honored to be here. I'm Tom Hicks. I'm a keynote speaker, former college dean, and lifelong educator. And I teach people how to juggle as a way to rethink failure, resilience, and growth. This was born out of the work I did with college students who were starting to fail for the first time. When I say fail, I mean they were getting their first F's, but sometimes D's, C's, and B's ever in their lives.
Yeah.
And they just struggled to deal with it. Sometimes would literally leave college over the weekend instead of finishing out the semester.
Wow.
But this really all started with a gift from my grandmother. My grandmother, after seeing I was encountering some challenge in my life, gave me this black box. And it's titled More Balls Than Most. And
gotta love that from grandma.
Yep. As you can imagine, from an 80-year-old grandmother, what she think that might be.
Yeah.
And it turns out to be 3 leather juggling balls. And the kit and the booklet that came with it was titled A Short Course in Life Enhancement. And that changed the way I felt and dealt with failure from that point forward, and use it as something to explore and embrace instead of avoid. And so I use that as the basis for these sessions I do with individuals and groups. And it's been a nice jumping off point for us to have conversations about failure, both in my day job and doing speaking and coaching.
I love the concept that a juggling kit is a life enhancement thing. I think for most folks, they're going to be like, I don't get that. What do you mean that's a life enhancement thing? So what's the connection they draw there, and what have you kind of pulled from it?
Yeah, a lot of it is around the fact that most of the mistakes we make are low stakes. They are not as big as we make them out to be. And so we need to be willing to make lots of low stakes mistakes whenever possible. And, as kids, we learn how to ride a bike or play an instrument or learn a language. And we don't think twice about making mistakes and correcting and iterating. And this booklet helped me reconnect with that kind of childhood wonder with learning and making mistakes. And so that's where I come from, making sure we're having a little bit of play, a little bit of joy at work, while also incorporating some iterative learning where we are continuing to build, even if it's not a straight line all the time. It's process and progress over perfection. So yeah, those are a bunch of the messages that are in there. You're right.
Yeah.
They didn't have to write that booklet like that. Most juggling kits, it's really dumbed down. It's Juggling 101 or Juggling for Dummies.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that that's, it just hit me at the right time.
Yeah.
And I learned to juggle that day in her house.
It's so cool. I mean, it's so cool that your grandma bought you that and that it had that message, and it, not only helped you in that moment, but obviously has become a foundational way you think about life and the way you've, approached your own work and the way you help, students, deal with failure, which I get. I mean, you're, one of the smarter kids in your class, you go off to school and suddenly the stuff comes at you and you're like, oh my gosh, this real world or closer to the real world stuff is kind of hard. I'm curious for your own journey. You mentioned your grandma giving you this thing. I'm like, who or what has helped you most in your work life, in your career?
Yeah, I will first take it back a little more personally and then get into work. But in doing a lot of this work, reflecting on this gift, my grandmother was the best gift giver I've ever known.
That's awesome.
Right. A couple of other lesser known examples are, those drawstring backpacks that are ubiquitous. My daughter got one yesterday as a giveaway at a soccer camp, right?
Yep.
They are cheap. I had one 25 years ago. I swear my grandmother got one of the first ones Nike pulled off the production line, and I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
It just sat for years until I realized everybody else is starting to use these. They became a thing. And I've taken that bag everywhere with me. Same thing, but maybe a little less popular. Those pants that zip off into shorts?
Sure. Yeah.
I think all white men have had a pair or two of those at some point, right? Well, I had 2 pairs of those before anybody else. And so in doing some reflection on my grandmother, what I've realized is that she had a profound professional impact on me as well. She started her own restaurant when she was in her 20s and 30s down in Georgia. And then with her husband in an eventual failed marriage, moved up to Buffalo, New York from living in Georgia and Florida. So you can imagine that. She started her own beauty salon in the basement of her house and was really, really successful. And so when I think back on who I know as entrepreneurs, I never thought of that as my grandmother growing up or while she was cutting my hair. And so just reflecting on her story has been amazing. And then my wife, my sister, and my mom are probably the biggest influences on me just personally. And from them, I got kind of my mantra to be competent, curious, and kind. Those are things I picked up from them. Yeah. And so that plays into professional life and going into situations where I may not know as much as I should or could, making sure I stay curious, or people assuming I'm the leader in the room because I'm a straight white man. And when I actually lead with curiosity and questions instead of dictating or taking charge right away. So, and then I've been lucky in lots of different situations and with different supervisors and colleagues that they've allowed me to fail, that it hasn't been all or nothing. And so I feel fortunate to be able to have that. So that's where that juggling kit and those lessons continue to come into play. I keep a set of juggling balls at my desk just to give me a break in between meetings. It's become just a part of my practice professionally and personally.
I love the extension of the grandma story. I mean, I think there's something about, people in our lives who are more of the sort of quiet entrepreneurs, meaning they just showed up and created things, right? And it didn't have like today, if you're an entrepreneur, you're not an entrepreneur until you tell 1,000 people that you're an entrepreneur. Like, it's required that you have to sort of wear it as a badge, as opposed to just, I'm going to start a restaurant. I'm going to start a a hair salon in my basement. Like those are just those quieter stories. I love that your family in general has been this source of support. And then I love that you mentioned that you've had people who gave you room to fail. Because I think for many of us, maybe we either haven't had that experience or didn't notice that we were maybe given that experience, and we put enough pressure on ourselves that we couldn't see it. I mean, you mentioned, the way we are as kids. And I think sometimes the lesson we learn from childhood and school is failure is bad, right? There is this wide-eyed curiosity we have, but then at some point, you get the bad grade and it's, oh my God, that's the scarlet letter. I can't have that. I better not fail again. And we don't necessarily take on that lesson that failure is a tool for growth as opposed to a thing that makes us quote unquote bad. So what was it like when you were working for people who created room for failure, and how did you, one, I guess, notice that room was there, and then what did it do for you in terms of your growth, professionally?
Yeah, I like the way you put that, TJ, partially because I just had a realization in the way that you phrased that I don't know if I realized I had that benefit of failure in the moment.
Yeah.
And now reflecting back, or there were periods of time when I lost that space in order to do that. And it became stark that we're in a different time, we're in a different era, different context, different leader that just doesn't allow for this. And so one thing I will say is that I had to have this conversation with a couple of clients last week, that when I work with the clients or when I've worked with students, they tend to be incredibly forgiving. And them giving me that space just reminds me that they're not expecting me to be perfect. I shouldn't be expecting that of them. This is a process and we have made some progress. But getting back to your question, when I think back to those spaces, they're centered around learning and curiosity. They are not centered around fear and getting things done.
Yeah.
And so it's so refreshing when I find myself in a space where I can pretty quickly tell, oh, these are people who want to learn, or who are curious, or have a vision instead of are afraid of what might happen.
I love the word curiosity. I think of it as one of my core values. I also think a lot of us think it's a core value, and we don't necessarily always practice it. We can veer into that space of fear, which can shut down that curiosity. How has juggling sort of helped you build the curiosity muscle?
Yeah, I've been trying to put this into words because I've got great photos and videos of people doing this, and then sometimes testimonials touch on this a little bit. What I think it does, it's a true putting theory into practice, right? It is, and so often we talk about having a growth mindset, or being resilient, or what it looks like to do that, or what are good questions to ask if you're curious. We don't give people or encourage spaces where they actually do it. And so I think that's why my sessions have resonated with people, because we're not just talking about it, we are actually doing it in the room. I have, 100, 150, 250 people all at once learning how to juggle one ball, and then two balls, and then three balls, doing a little bit of reflection, sharing with the neighbor. And I give them some phrases to use in order to encourage that curiosity, or encourage how to respond or celebrate after a failure.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the missing pieces, is that we talk about and we know the right things to say. We don't always have a safer space to try it or test it or iterate on it.
Yeah. I mean, I've watched some of the videos on your site of you going through that process, and it's pretty fascinating because, as soon as like somebody says, you're going to learn how to juggle in this event today, my blood pressure goes up, because the first thing I think of is I am guaranteed going to fail at that. Right. And so I'm already sort of in the quote unquote wrong mindset. I'm in this mindset of, okay, I'm going to look bad. I'm going to look dumb. Failure is not good. And therefore I'm going to feel stupid. So how do you show up in a room with a bunch of people who probably feel similarly? And you mentioned, hey, let's go learn how to juggle. And they're like, and what does that look like? I mean, I definitely invite people to check out your site and explore it, but I'm curious if you can kind of walk through like, what is the experience and how are you helping people embrace this more curious mindset about failure in the process?
Yeah. I start with that story about this gift from my grandmother, and
Mm-hmm.
that seems to put people at ease or give them a little laugh to help take the edge off in the room. I
Mm-hmm.
think once they realize that everybody is doing this and we're doing it together,
Mm-hmm.
that also helps to alleviate some of that stress.
Yeah.
There are still plenty of comments I hear as I'm working the room or greeting people as they come in, and they say, I can't juggle, or I'll never be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the neat thing is, partially because it's always been a part of this session, but I placed it specifically. I have a slide, some content on what it looks like to have a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, along with
Okay.
some phrases that go along with both.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of that fixed mindset can shift theoretically using words by adding yet on the end of it, right? And
Okay.
so, some of this, I almost titled this The Power of Yet, because adding that on to so many of those statements may help move us forward a little bit. And then I tell a story about me riding and crashing my bike when I was a
Mm-hmm.
kid,
Yeah.
because I bit off more than I could chew. And I learned that, you know what? Not all learning, not all progress is linear.
Mm-hmm.
And so sharing some stories like that seems to disarm people,
Yeah.
giving them some language or even holding them accountable for that. Because even when we start juggling the first ball, or especially when we get to two
Mm-hmm.
seems to be the spot where people start to drop more. We then make sure yet is out in the world. And when they say, I can't do this, and their neighbors are saying yet, right? They're holding them accountable for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one piece that really seems to help people turn the corner is a short video I show from Benjamin Zander. He and his wife Roz wrote a book called The Art of Possibility. Ben
Okay.
is now retired, but is a master conductor and teacher. He was the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic for many, many years.
Yeah.
And I use this 1 minute video clip where he teaches students, people, how to embrace failure. And he says, when we make a mistake, we should celebrate it. And what that looks like is when we make a mistake, we go, how fascinating. We throw our hands up in the
Hmm.
air and we yell, how fascinating.
Wow.
Right. And
Okay.
so as people start to drop their second ball, or we get to 3 balls and they're dropping balls, people all over the room, it is just a constant, how fascinating.
That's
Right.
funny. Yeah.
And so, I have people going, throw, throw, catch, catch, how fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to really level the playing field and
Yeah.
help people transition from I can't do this to this is something new to me,
Hmm.
or I can't do this yet. And it's really fun to be in the room when that happens.
I can imagine. I mean, it sounds hilarious. Just a bunch of people yelling.
Sure.
How fascinating, especially with the arms in the air. The visual adds a lot to it. I think I saw one of those videos of him doing that with one of his students, and it was very funny. And he has this sort of wonderful energy where he's
Yes,
like
he
kind of
does.
like got this almost nutty professor energy, and he's just like boisterously like, how fascinating. Like it's very
Yes.
funny. And the one I saw was him teaching a cellist, and the cellist is sort of this adorable kid. He's just like, because you could tell he's stressed, and then he's like, whoop. Like it's very funny. And I think there's something about the sort of somatic experience of it as much as the words, right? Because failure, and I think he even gets into this, like failure is shrinking. It's compacting, right? Like we all want to become invisible, right? And so to
Exactly.
just kind of expand and become big is a really beautiful part of it. I mean, have you noticed the impact of that piece of it?
Yes. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that connects to your earlier point about just what we've been taught, or
Yeah.
how we're supposed to feel about failure. We're literally taught to close up and close off. We're not open
Mm-hmm.
to innovation. We're not open to engagement. And so
Yeah.
when we extrapolate that, that means we've got 40% of our employees are afraid of failure, right? They've got this fear of failure. Almost 40% are actively resistant to change. And so if we can, both for their benefit and for business's benefit or organization's benefit, can chip away at that a little bit and let them feel more comfortable, let them be their authentic selves, let them feel like they can fail, that's great. And yes, the somatic thing is real. In one of my most recent sessions, I do a quick check-in a couple of times just to see how people are doing, just to make sure they're along with it. And a woman, and I'm not saying this to boast at all, but a woman raised her hand and just started talking. She said, Tom, you have changed my life. This lesson has changed my life.
Yeah.
I've been a perfectionist. I've been so afraid to fail. And I've just never opened myself up to failure. She literally used those words. And so I don't claim all credit for that. You're right. Ben Zander is an incredible teacher. And that clip that you mentioned is a great example of that. So yeah, I think a little bit of it is that somatic piece of taking it out of our heads, failure out of our heads, and dealing with it or confronting it with our entire body and saying, I'm throwing my hands up in the air and I'm opening up no matter what just happened here. And I'm going to celebrate this.
Yeah. It's a sort of an invitation to be seen in that moment, which is, the opposite of what your instinct is. And I think it's kind of beautiful to do that, right? I mean, it sounds silly, but if somebody was at work and, I'm just imagining like you give a presentation and it doesn't go great. And then that person just goes, how fascinating. Like, I don't know. It's hard to imagine it not at least breaking the room a little bit and taking that tension down, even if people might be like, what the heck? So I think there's something about, bringing that into your world, like taking the lesson and also just being open to doing that. And you come back to, you mentioned this idea of growth mindset and fixed mindset. And I think it's another one of those things, kind of like curiosity, where I think if you ask most people who are working, and trying to grow in their careers and all that, they're going to be, of course I have a growth mindset. And yet as soon as you mention the person who says, I don't know how to juggle, I'm like, I've said that before. And I might even have said, I'll never be able to juggle. Right. I mean, so I know all of us, I think, can be prone to the fixed mindset, even if sort of our identity hinges on us believing otherwise. Right. And so I feel like this exercise and probably some of the others you do, it exposes that, but then invites a way to see a different possibility. And I think that's probably part of what that woman experienced was like, oh my gosh, I've been telling myself I can't do things. And suddenly I can, or at least I can try, and I can make the effort, and not that perfection thing is real. I mean, I think so many of us have it, even if we don't think we do.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that was born out of my work with students in college. They're just the number of students who come in who have had essentially perfect grades. And have needed varying degrees of effort to get those, right? Some have worked really hard and some haven't had to work hard for that. And they are in a space where they may already feel a little bit more isolated, and then they get that B or that C or that D, and it's easier to close off instead of being open to what's possible. And so I appreciate the lessons that I've gotten from all those students over the years, the thousands and thousands of students and teams and leaders that I've worked with. This is born out of what they've taught me. And it is nice and rewarding to be able to see some of that shift in the room. That's the other thing I like about this how fascinating idea, or I can't do this yet, or this is new to me. When I'm working with athletes, I tend to use so what, now what, for them to get over, a bad pass or a bad shot or something like that. A misplay. These are short things that we can remind ourselves of pretty quickly in the moment. Now, I'll have to admit, I still play basketball with a bunch of middle-aged guys, and I'm prone to, when I miss a shot, to say, my bad, or I'm done shooting. And every once in a while, they'll remind me, hey, Tom, no, keep shooting. You've got this. You'll get this. And so nobody is perfect all the time on this, but
Yeah.
it's nice to have that reminder.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you're liking what you hear and like the idea of making work not suck, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session. What would make your work culture more human? Let's talk about it. All right, back to the show. Yeah, I think you're giving people very useful tools. I like the so what, now what too. It's just like, okay, I mean, I've always felt now what is such a good prompt. It's like, okay, well, reality just changed in some way. Okay, now what do we do? Like, I think there's something awakening about that kind of idea. I was thinking about work cultures, and I imagine you show up at a lot of different places and you witness a lot of stuff. What have you seen? What do the best work cultures look like? What do you notice in them?
Authenticity and trust are the two things that spring to mind right away. Especially in this age of so many options of how and where we get our work done, having some trust in how and where people are getting their work done, and then it's about the outcome, not about how people got there.
Yeah.
Is really, I see it's just really liberating with people or for people. And then that authenticity piece, it may sound like old hat, but when I know exactly where a leader stands, it's so much easier for me to get my job done. We may not always agree.
Yeah.
But being able to know a decision or know a standpoint and understand the context behind it, being able to ask why, and leaders or leadership not being challenged by that, but embracing that is so refreshing as well. And then I try to do this myself, but leading with listening, just trying to start the conversation by listening, not by talking, is just so beneficial. And I feel doesn't happen nearly as much as it should. Yeah,
I think you're right. I think it's almost like the concept of leading with listening almost just sounds backwards to us. It's like, oh, we're going to have a conversation. Okay, I'll start. I'll tell you some things, and then maybe I'll ask what you think, and then maybe I'll actually be listening, as opposed to thinking about how I'm going to react or trying to defend my position because you've somehow challenged it, right? So there's all these layers, but I think the disruption of just starting with inviting people to speak and you being present to listen is actually kind of jarring, even though there's nothing sort of physically crazy about it, but it is emotionally, I think, jarring for somebody. So I love that you mentioned that. I'm thinking about cultures where failure and fear, like there's the fear-based culture, right? And failure is either operationally not accepted or maybe even verbally and operationally not accepted. You have two kinds, right? Some places it's like, fail big, blah, blah, blah. And then operationally it's like, no, you're not going to fail. And then others, they're just like, nope, no room for failure here. Either one of those kinds of cultures. I mean, have you been able to show up in any culture that's closer to that and notice a difference with any of the work you've done?
A little bit. I am often in and out and don't get to see the long-term effects.
Yeah.
One example I do have, though, is in working with a local large nonprofit. I did 6 sessions with all of their essentially middle management, their managers and assistant managers. And same session with each 6, broken down into groups of about 40.
Okay.
And so, was able to have about 250 of their leaders over the course of a month and a half in. And that's a little over a year, 13 months ago. And they still, to this week, are posting on their internal Slack channels of their progress, weekly progress, juggling. And how fascinating. And so I don't think they were incredibly fear-based before I got there. They were relatively inexperienced, though. And so I do have some hope that some of those lessons stick and either provide people some relief or a break, right? If they continue to have some juggling balls at their desk or chat about it. or are able to find a couple of coworkers where they're able to say how fascinating together, or
Yeah.
so what, now what, and provide that support for each other. But as you can imagine, I'm usually not getting organizations who are in that spot or leaders in that spot seeking out something, a session like I'm offering.
Yeah.
But I'd love the opportunity, TJ.
Yeah.
It'd
I
be a
mean,
lot of fun.
I think it would be amazing just to witness. I mean, I love what you just described, first off, because I think the idea that when folks are inexperienced, sometimes that can pull us down into fear, just reflexively,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And I think something that we forget sometimes is, even in a culture that's maybe fairly fear-based, it could be, a lot of that could be driven by, not sort of malice. It's because people are experiencing, some kind of their own fears or imposter syndrome, or maybe they are kind of inexperienced in the roles that they're in. And so they're just resorting to fear because that's what their nervous system is telling them to do. So I think that's a nice insight to recognize that when people are maybe having some issues, it's not necessarily from a bad place. It's just they don't have the tools they need. I think that's really cool. And then I think, the thing I wonder about, I mean, this sounds sort of silly, but I'm just like, should we just be giving everyone a new hires or onboarding? Should they be getting a juggling kit just like you got from your grandma? And like, it just feels like something like that. One, it's a little bit like, ooh, what's this? And so it's cool and neat as an experience. And then it says something about like, hey, let's try something new here. Let's try to show up in a different way than maybe what you're used to. I mean, what do you think about that? Maybe you should start selling those to as part of onboarding packages.
So that's actually the next extension, TJ. So
I love it.
I'm glad you brought that up. And we didn't talk about that beforehand,
Yeah.
right? And so I found a local, another small entrepreneur who is able to brand.
Nice.
And so some leather juggling balls that I have.
Yeah.
And so what she's able to do is use a laser etcher and put different phrases. And so on these juggling balls here that I'm showing you, it has how fascinating and throw, catch, catch as reminders for people. And so, yes. So if you have a listener who might think this would be an opportunity, there has been some interest in that.
Yeah.
Not at a organization-wide scale, but at a smaller scale.
Sure.
But I think I'm working towards that, and that'd be something I'd be really interested in.
Yeah.
And of course, it would have to be endorsed and supported by the CEO leadership.
Absolutely.
It needs to be everybody.
100%.
It's not just, hey, let's try to get our new people this philosophy and see if it goes anywhere. And so I have a couple of organizations that I'm working with this fall.
Yeah.
There might be some opportunities with.
I love that. I mean, I think the possibilities, coming back to the Xander who wrote the book, The Art of Possibility, that feels like a really big possibility, that it's just such a nice, simple way for organizations to rally around something that reflects an ethos that hopefully a lot of organizations are actually interested in. But I can certainly imagine showing up, in day one and being like, well, what is this? And then you get told by your leader, like, well, here's kind of the story. And then you kind of learn about hopefully how it's woven into the fabric of the organization. And then maybe the CEO shows up at some point, doing
Walks
their thing.
On stage,
and,
juggling 3 balls. Yep.
Doing how fascinating and all that stuff. Cause I do think it does need to sort of stitch together all the way through. But I love that you're working on that. I wanted to talk specifically about the industry I come from because it's an interesting one. I worked in advertising for years, and on some level, there's certainly a lot of curiosity. It's a creative business and all that. There's also a lot of fear, partially because it's a very client directed business. And so you want to like show up well for the client, and a lot of money's on the line. There's fast timelines. And so that puts pressure in the room. So you have this interesting mix of, yes, we're curious and we're growth minded, and it's really easy to be sort of smothered by the fear. And then you have, I think, this added layer of, you've talked about low stakes and all that stuff. The stakes can feel quite high. One, to some degree they are, in the sense that, well, if the client doesn't love this work and they start to, shop around for another agency, we're out several $1,000,000. And at a sort of more personal level, the work that everyone creates every day is very personal. Like out of nowhere, we came up with this idea and we're sharing it, and there's a vulnerability in that. So how do you sort of bridge the gap from practicing with the lower stakes, I dropped the ball, who cares, to, okay, that muscle starts to translate into my ability to step into these higher stakes conversations? Is it simply building the muscle? Is there a way to make that move? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't know if I have a great or nuanced answer to it. I will say that we are often trying to, and the environment that you described in marketing sounds very similar. I don't know much about marketing, but it sounds very similar to what's going on with especially small private colleges today.
Yeah.
It's just super competitive. There aren't enough students. And so much of what you were describing is what I was feeling while working in that context. And so I do think what often happens to me, or what I experience and what I see others experience, is that due to a higher rate of turnover, people are often not given the opportunity to build that muscle in safer context before they are expected to move into bigger and better roles. And the nice thing about learning how to juggle is you need to build that foundation. Although I say it during my sessions, we don't spend time doing it specifically, but you need to spend 90% of your time learning how to juggle one ball consistently. Because if you don't know where you're releasing and catching that ball, it's going to be really hard to add a second one in, and especially hard to add a third one in. And so my main worry that I think connects a little bit to what you're saying, TJ, is that our newer employees, our newer staff, our newer hires aren't always given the time and the space and the flexibility to fully develop, and they're often thrown in to situations before they're truly ready. That's nothing to say of the training that they're getting or anything like that. There can be great training. But there's often just some time on the job that's needed. And so, I tell these attendees that we're not going to just skip to the good part today. This is, we need to, doing this foundational work is important. And so that's when I see organizations doing this well, it is well-developed emerging leaders programs and new leader onboarding and orientation that lasts a year, not a week, right? And so, those are, I can recognize where you're coming from, and maybe you and I can work on something to help these organizations.
There's work to be done for sure. I mean, I think the foundation stuff that you talk about, I think that's really important, and I love that your approach on the juggling front is a very good example of that. And then you can say, okay, well, how do we follow a similar process at work? And it's tough because there are timelines and deadlines and, cranky bosses and cranky clients and all this stuff. But the core idea that there's some foundational learning and developing that needs to happen, I just think it's true. And, we can either ignore it and just sit in that sort of messy, sucky space, or we can try to make it better. And I certainly think that you're helping there, and I'm doing my best on my end. I'm curious if there is any conversation around work culture, failure, et cetera, some of the stuff we've been talking about that you feel like we're not really having that we need to have.
I think I maybe mentioned it already. Really just that allowing people to actually do this, not just talk about it, and allowing people to do it. And so that's why a lot of organizations bring me in, right? Although I'm not a long-term solution, it sets them up. It kind of sets the table, sets the stage for them to continue to have these conversations. I will say a lot of the feedback I get and a lot of the conversations I have is, again, a little bit more on the personal side, but pulls over into work. Nobody posts their fails on social. right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so in seeing, and the same thing with LinkedIn, right? In the work
Yeah.
environment,
Yeah.
everybody sees all the great things that everybody else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't get to see everything that happens behind the scenes, or how many
Mm-hmm.
times, how many photos it took to get that one photo that looks
Yeah.
great on LinkedIn, or
Mm-hmm.
the work that somebody put in to get to this certain level. And so I don't think I myself can do much about that, but
Yeah.
it's good to know that people are recognizing that.
Yeah.
And when I come across one of those, hey, here's a super transparent post about what happened here,
Mm-hmm.
I just eat that up, because
Yeah.
that's somebody being really vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
and setting a good examples for others. This is a reminder that I need to be better about that too, and not just
Yeah.
post all the great photos of everybody juggling from my events, right?
Yeah.
And so I think culturally it spills into that work life in many ways. And so I wonder if there are ways for us to have ongoing conversations at work about the mistakes that we made this week, or
Yeah.
what we learned from those mistakes, whatever that might look like.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. I mean, I love what you mentioned about social, because I do think, you know, there's a lot more room for that, to just own up, for, whatever it is, in my business, I feel all the time at, trying to get new clients and all that stuff. And yeah, I'm not out there posting like, hey, I talked to somebody yesterday and they said, nah, they're not interested. Or I talked to somebody a month ago and they just ghosted me. Like, and like, I'm not saying that,
Yes. Yep.
and yet everybody's experiencing those things on some level relative to their world. So I love that. And then I think within work cultures, just, you know, I can't, I cannot count the amount of times there was a talk about, hey, let's do a post-mortem on this
Yes.
project. And we
Yes.
didn't,
Yep.
and partially like post-mortem's probably not the best phrase. It just sounds
Yes.
dark.
Yes.
Right. Like I think maybe we need to change that to like a failure celebration or something like that, a failure party. Like, I mean, I know it's a little goofy, but it's kind of like going back to like,
Mhm.
that's fascinating, or how fascinating. It's just shifting the mindset around it and coming in with that curiosity as opposed to ready to sort of point fingers, which is what I think people fear from those kinds of meetings. So it takes a lot of work to hold that space and say, yeah, we're going to come. We're going to talk about stuff. We're going to celebrate that people tried things and failed, because that is
Yeah.
how we're learning.
And it just made me think of a really practical example, but on making sure that supervisors are checking in with supervisees on a regular basis. I know that
Yeah.
doesn't often happen as much as it should.
Yeah.
And one of the questions there is, on the positive side of things, what's one thing you learned this week, which often gets to some mistake
Yeah.
or failure, or
Mm.
if the context allows for, what's something that didn't go well this week,
Yeah.
and just you know a small thing for supervisors to be able to check
Hmm.
in and start that conversation. And
Yeah.
again, from a listening and a curious side of things, not a trying to figure out, oh, how can I, hold you accountable for a mistake I didn't know about this week. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there are some small things, and I think you and I could work on some bigger things too.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely room for all of us to get a little better at that. I've been asking you a number of questions. I'm curious if you have a question you'd like to share for our audience.
Yeah, well, first, TJ, I'll put this on you. Where's your juggling game at these days? What's your skill look like?
I would say it's somewhere between non-existent and terrible is probably where my skill is at, but I'm open. I'm open to trying, because every time I've tried, I've definitely not done it the way you've described, where you're sitting there with one ball
Yeah,
and really focusing on that and getting sort of your body sort of acclimated to like where you're catching, when you're catching, and all that. I've just been like starting with two, and then maybe I'm having a little luck, and then I go to three and it all falls down.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to assume, but I see some Snoopy artwork and a guitar behind you,
Yes.
and my guess is that might be a way for you to exercise some of that failure and mistake celebration. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. I'm glad you've got a practice there. It doesn't need
Yeah.
to be juggling, but
Yeah.
there's a bunch of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I make plenty of mistakes on the guitar. And for whatever reason, when I make them on the guitar, like there might be a second of like, and then I'm like, all right, let's try it again.
Yep. It's amazing how
Yeah.
when we give ourselves permission to do that,
Yeah.
what that looks and feels like. So as for audience,
Yeah.
it's something I asked during all my sessions. How will you integrate or allow yourself to have some low stakes failure and play in your work today? And so this is not something that we need to wait on, right?
Yeah.
This is something that we can do right away. It can be something that you don't even have to share with anybody else, but not that I'm the one or you need permission from me,
Right.
but I want to encourage you to do a little low stakes mistake or a little low stakes failure and allow yourself to play a little bit. You know, with the advent of these fidget toys and these squish fidget toys, it is easier than ever to have a little bit of play or let your mind go to different places in between meetings. And so whether it's juggling balls or a fidget toy or something like that, I highly encourage that.
Yeah, I love that. I think we grossly undervalue play in the work world. You know, we judge it as sort of not appropriate even. And I think it's just, you know, the reason we learn so much as kids is because we're playing.
Yes.
I mean, it really comes down to that. So why wouldn't we want more of that, especially if we're up there going, we need more innovation in our business? Well, play. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
If you could wave a magic wand and create a fully desuckified work world, what does that world look like?
As we've talked about, very little or no fear of failure. I would love to kind of demystify that. I want to encourage, I would love to have a space where people are encouraged to explore and embrace our mistakes and instead of avoid them altogether. So yeah, exploration and embrace instead of avoid.
Sounds pretty cool to me. Yeah. I mean, I've probably been in that a few times, maybe not fully realizing it, but I think when you picture it, you're immediately lighter.
Yes.
And it's so much easier to create and build and connect and collaborate when you're lighter like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And who wants to feel heavy, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I like that analogy or that the way you put that, TJ.
Yeah. So speaking of play and fun, one of the things I like to do on my show is, and you've listened, so you've heard cat sounds and other sound effects showing up. And I always invite my guests to create a sound or bring a sound that will also show up in the intro to the show. So do you have a desuckified sound effect to share?
I do. And this is inspired by my love of the Muppets and all things Kermit the Frog.
Okay.
That was a big influence on me growing up and something my mom supported. You can see my Jim Henson and Kermit Apple poster behind me. And so my sound effect would be my mimicking or hopefully sounding like Kermit's greeting to people. It's hi-ho.
I feel it. I can picture that coming out of Kermit. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the Muppets, I think, are, if you ever want to feel a little lighter, watch some Muppets. Yeah.
I agree.
So where can people track you down online and learn more about all the cool work you're doing as a chief juggling officer?
I have a website at tom-hicks.com. And so it's HICKS.com. So tom-hicks.com. And I try to post at least weekly on LinkedIn, Tom Hicks as well. I share a little bit about my day job and a lot about my speaking and consulting. Yeah. Including videos and photos. And so those are the easiest places to find me. Okay. Well, I'll be sure to include that in the notes so people can just click and track you down. And this was so much fun, Tom. I sometimes I forget that there's another possibility other than sort of clenching and bearing down and just trying to force our way through. And it's a nice reminder that we can be lighter, more playful, more open to being fascinated by failure and realizing, yeah, we haven't figured it out yet. That's okay. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I've appreciated this conversation and I'm feeling lighter as well. Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Bye-bye. Thanks, TJ. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork podcast. And a huge thanks to Tom for bringing a fun and refreshing look at failure to the show. You can follow Tom on LinkedIn
And check out his site at tom-hicks.com to learn more about his work. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to explore what a more human work culture could look like, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session. Type meow in the calendar invite, and I'll also send you a free DesuckifyWork t-shirt. Bye, everyone!